Good evening. Welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Hey, we're in the middle of a study of Matthew 16, 27, and 28, and we are demonstrating from this passage a first century second coming of Christ. Now, before we get into Isaiah 59, which is the second major prophetic source for Matthew 16, 27, and 28 that we're going to investigate, I want to do take tonight's video and do a very brief recap of the ground we've covered up to this point. So number one, we saw through our first several videos, what we did was we looked at the context of Matthew 16. And we demonstrated that Psalm 2 and Psalm 110 lie behind that context and the coming of the Son of Man in verse 27 and 28, which means that that coming of the Lord in judgment was in fulfillment of Psalm 2 and Psalm 110. It was a vindicative judgment coming of Christ in vengeance of those who would kill both him and his disciples. Now remember, what that did is that eliminated the ascension, the transfiguration, and the day of Pentecost as possible fulfillments for Matthew 16, 27, 28. Why? Because those events do not contain in their context, in their historical setting, the element of a vindicative judgment coming of Jesus. None of those historical events concern Jesus coming in judgment of those who killed him and his disciples. It's not there. It's impossible. That means that Matthew 16, 27, and 28 must be placed beyond those first century events at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And that event, as we've seen, fits perfectly with the theme and the framework of a vindicative coming of the Lord in judgment against those who pierced him. Now, from there, we looked at the first prophetic source for Matthew 16, 27, 28, which is Daniel 7. And we made this argument. Matthew 16, 27, 28 equals Daniel 7. But Daniel 7 prophesies the second coming of Christ. Therefore, Matthew 16, 27, 28, in fulfillment of Daniel 7, prophesied the second coming of Christ, which Jesus placed within the lifetime of his own generation. Now, in order to make that argument airtight and a valid argument, we said that we had to demonstrate that Daniel 7 did actually prophesy Jesus' second coming. And we did that by looking at two eschatological themes found within Daniel 7. If you recall, they are the time and a half of time, and the time when the saints receive the kingdom. Now, I'm not going to rehearse everything we covered in those two elements, but we showed you from parallel studies and parallel charts that both the time and a half of time, and the time when the saints receive the kingdom at the coming of the Lord in Daniel 7 were placed, number one, at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, and number two, they were fulfilled in the context of the second coming of Christ and the judgment of all nations. And what that does is it identifies Daniel 7 as the second coming passage. And what that means is since Matthew 16, 27 and 28 would be in fulfillment of Daniel 7, then Matthew 16, 28, 7 and 28 did prophesy the second coming of Christ, which was fulfilled in the lifetime of Jesus' generation. That's powerful stuff. Go back and watch the videos up to this point. You will be amazed by the consistency within the themes and the framework of the vindicative coming of Christ in judgment of those who pierced him and in judgment of those who persecuted his disciples. And that judgment in fulfillment of Matthew 16, 27, 28, Daniel 7, and Psalm 2 and Psalm 110 took place at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The second coming of Christ, just like Jesus promised, occurred in AD 70. And where we're going to go from here, as I said last video, is we're going to go into Isaiah chapter 59, which, as we'll see, served as a second prophetic source for Matthew 16, 27, and 28. And as we'll see, by investigating several of the core themes and elements inside of Isaiah 59, in the context of the coming of the Lord, we will identify once again that Matthew 16, 27, and 28, in fulfillment of Isaiah 59, prophesied the second coming of Christ, which must have been fulfilled in the lifetime of Jesus' contemporary generation. It's going to be a good study. Look forward to Isaiah 59, and we'll see you next time on Answers on Eschatology. Have a great night, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.